We're back with a continuation of the argument that we were working on last week about magic and science, and where Tolkien gets his ideas of magic and backstory into his studies of theology at the Birmingham Oratory with Father Morgan, who was a student of St. John Henry Newman. And this, of course, gets us to the question of truth. I know you can keep up. So Newman, in his essay on the development of Christian doctrine, is at the top level trying to understand how we know whether an idea is true. It's like, and that's a meta thing, because you can say, how do we know anything is true? How do you know an idea is true? And Newman was working with definitions of ideas as things that we constantly judge. So he's saying, how do we judge an idea to be true? And there's a long proof that's involved in it. And I realized last week I was trying to drop you into the middle of that proof in order to understand something about how ancient Christianity was perceived by the pagan world around it. And we can't get there yet, because what we have to do first, this is a very Newman level of investigation, is figure out what it is that we are doing when we want an idea to be true, and how we test things. So tonight we're sort of testing ideas that we have and that we all as a culture have accepted as true. But primary example is going to be evolution. So just spoiler alert. But it works at a meta level too, of what kind of processes, mental or otherwise experimental, but what kind of processes we use to test whether something is true. So how do we know if what we believe is true? Well, you could say this matters enormously, or does it? Sometimes things seem to matter. So for example, if I put my hand in a flame, I get burned. That's true, right? Okay. And I instantly started thinking about yogis who can train themselves not to perceive the pain or something like that. But I think it's actually physically true that if you stick your hand in a flame, you're gonna burn. But then we get to this next level of, okay, so what's fire? And then I tried asking Grok this morning. Apparently Grok was down. So it's like, if we don't have our AIs to answer us anymore, what do we do? And I say, oh, I had to think about it. I think I know what fire is, right? It's oxygen and heat and, oh yes, and some fuel to burn. But then it's a chemical reaction that makes light. And okay, now we're in the level of, well, is fire actually a thing? It's the reaction that happens with the heat, oxygen, and fuel, but is fire a something? Well, in antiquity is of course considered an element. So you'd have earth, which are solids, and water, which is liquid, and air, which is gas, and then fire. And then fire is somehow that fourth elemental property of matter. Is fire material? But it's the burning of the matter in the oxygen, but it rises, right? Does it matter which of those descriptions we use of fire to know that if you stick your hand in fire, it'll burn? Not really. People understood not to put their hands in fires in antiquity, even when they didn't know that it was oxygen with heat and fuel and so forth. And remember what I asked just a minute ago, I was saying, it's like, how do we know what if we believe is true? Well, which things do we need to know are true? Getting our hands burned if we put them in a flame is one kind of truth. How to describe what fire is? Does it matter whether we describe it as a chemical reaction or as an element? Many truths, like things that we hold as absolutely true, don't seem to have this same the different. I hope you're holding on to the difference between the truth that you have if you burn your hand versus the truth that you have if you know what fire is. You can have a completely wrong idea about fire, for example, that it's an element, and still know not to put your hand in the fire and get burned. So perhaps many things that we absolutely, for example, scientifically believe are true don't make any difference whether we believe them. Many people would say that that is the case with, I don't know, theology. How much does it matter? There's huge online fights regularly. We're in one right now about, which description of God is the correct one to use because, our eternal salvation is at stake. But will we catch fire if we have the wrong idea? Well, and there you go, right? And the primary thing that seems to differentiate all of these questions of truth is about control, which is where you end up with the magic, right? If I want to control the fire, does it matter if I know its name? Does it matter if I know its properties? Chemically, does it matter if I know what it is elementally? At what point does true, what does it matter whether something is true become what is it that we need to know in order to control our world? Well, one of the kinds of ideas that seems to be regularly up for debate, which those of you in the unauthorized world know that it's currently up for debate among the Castelia House readers, is evolution. And so as a way of testing this problem of how do we know ideas are true, I just figured why should Vox Day get all the fun? We're diving in. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Okay. So we're here, right? We're going to get this question. What difference does it make whether the theory of evolution by natural selection is true?
What difference does it make? I think it makes a big difference to the people promoting it. And the odd thing to me, as being a person who appreciates science, is that it has to be true for them because I think it's an alternative religion.
Yeah, but so if that's the case, right? Is there any level? This is where I wanted to start because I need to know why these guys care so much, right? If it's simply an alternative religion, we can speed ahead, right, to its as a theological question. But it's allegedly a scientific question, so shouldn't it matter at the same level as whether I burn myself if I stick my hand in the fire?
Do scientists normally ask themselves the question before they embark on their careers? Why am I asking this question?
One would hope. Isn't that the point of it all? So I have a book. I have a book that I'm going to be using a lot. It's called The Book of Trees, right? And it's about visualizing branches of knowledge, and it's by Manuel Lima. I think I got it at the Getty, and I was thinking about trees, right? And he has a very interesting quotation at the beginning. Okay, no, I'm not going to read that yet. Although it's by Francis Bacon, but there is a nice quotation from Harry S. Truman with a period after the S, which is wrong because the S was not an abbreviation for anything. But anyway, the only new thing in the world is the history you don't know. I like that's up there with my tribute to Scott Adams. Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat the things that appear in history books but never actually happened. Salute to Scott Adams. I've had that up outside my office door for 20 years. It's like he's the best description of the problem of studying history. Okay, forget that for a second. Science. you'd think that they I isn't science okay that I'm sorry, I have to bounce off Vox a lot because he's setting the question, right? But he said he doesn't care about the why of anything in this particular instance. He's caring about the what and whether or not the mechanism that is premised by the theory of evolution by natural selection, aka the natural selection part, is actually a mechanism that you can say is true. But the question that I met it up with was, what difference does it make whether it's true or not? Like, does it make absolutely any difference whatsoever whether the theory of evolution by natural selection is true versus, like, my examples between, does it matter for how we deal with fire between it's an element or it's, combustion of you can technically know how to deal with stuff like, I don't know, put out forest fires, which people certainly knew how to do before they had a theory of oxygen and fuel. Is there any practical application to the theory of evolution by natural selection?
Is there any practical application to it? No, there's no practical application to it unless you practically want to remake society, which the people who have been promoting it have wanted to do, because what other use have they found for it?
Well, how is it about society? What? Right? No, seriously, it
Eugenics.
okay, but that is saying if you, but okay, so this is the problem, right? Eugenics is not actually meant to bring about a new species, technically.
No, it's not.
It's meant to bring about
yeah.
better individuals of the particular species.
Mm-hmm. Right, but I think they found, and I have nothing in notes around me.
I do
to prove this.
Oh no, I dropped my notes.
But I think in the 19th century, they were a bit of fellow travelers. That they the people who were eugenicists, and originally that didn't mean killing a bunch of people. That meant you gathered together in groups, and
Yes.
there were religious type groups in the United States that did this.
Absolutely.
To breed better people, to better marriages and better people. And it was only later, after Margaret Sanger helped to found Planned Parenthood,
correct. So Planned Parenthood
was applied to, well, just
was
preventing
eugenically
the wrong people.
Right. Motivated.
And right. They're, yeah, right. They were genetically motivated, and people could look at evolution and say, oh, well, you see, nature itself does this. Maybe we'll just speed it up. Right. We can look at these traits ourselves. If we can, I'm just taking a guess here. If we can look at the evolution of different species in the world as theorized by Darwin, and we can recognize that creatures evolve based upon traits that are superior, maybe we can just identify the traits that are superior and just start eliminating the people, or making people with these similar traits.
Okay.
And then
so
that led to eliminating
I will put it to you
people
that has zero to
who
do
didn't have
with
them.
the theory of evolution by natural selection.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that people used it.
They use, yes. So it's an
it.
idea that's useful for persuasive purposes. Well, that's what, and see, that's the difference.
Right.
It's like, when I say, what difference does it make whether the theory is actually true? And this is, you're giving a very good example, which people would say, oh, well, it matters how, who we are, who we have children with. We knew that before.
We already knew that. We did.
Before Darwin. It's why, I don't know, consanguinity laws become so significant in medieval Europe, right? Not cousin marriages, but also everybody knew it from, I don't know, breeding animals.
Yeah.
Right. It's famously, there's the story of how Jacob put spotted poles out in front of the sheep so that he can get spotted sheep versus not spotted sheep and divide them out. That his sheep are spotted and Laban's are not, or vice versa. Anyway, or just selective breeding of animals. But you don't end up with new species. That's the problem with the theory of evolution by natural selection. Says this is where new species come from, rather than, as I don't know, horticulture and animal husbandry for the whole of human history.
Yeah, personally, there's absolutely nothing about the theory, and I want to emphasize theory of evolution, that bothers me. What bothers me is that people started treating it as dogma, and they still do in schools. and they won't even discuss it. It's become almost a religious principle.
It always was. You're jumping way ahead of me even without notes.
Sorry, I keep doing that again.
But no, but the thing is, you're
I've
right.
given this a thought before.
That I try to keep her on pace, and she just jumps right ahead. But what you're answering is probably what people would say. I mean, it's like, oh, well, isn't this better for us so that we know how to, improve our biological reality? And it's like, no, because the people leading up to Darwin were, breeding bigger cows for centuries before
Yes.
they had any theory of evolution by
Right.
natural selection. It's like the difference between the theory of oxygen and heat and fuel versus fourth element. It doesn't change the way you operate with fire. There's still practical responses that you have to fire that you probably find experimentally with dealing with fires. And the same thing had already been true with species, that you know how to make lots of different dog breeds.
Right. They knew how to cross donkeys and horses and get, I think they're called hinnies or something like that.
Yeah, or mules, they're
mules, right?
Mules and no, donkeys and horses wait. Well, anyway, we've been crossbreeding animals for some time, and the thing about species is the idea is that only the species can mate with itself, so you have to be of the same species to have viable offspring.
Right.
So the idea that you could, I mean, what we just give is like crossbreeding with different species. Allegedly, that's how we end up with, I don't know, different canines. Not everything will breed with everything else, and what will breed with each other. So even what you define as a species, the circular definition of if you can breed with it, it's the same species, but if you can't, it's not. Which I don't know why we then have this argument about race and species. It's like if everybody can breed with each other and you have babies, that counts. So there you go. It's the species. So practically breeding was already something that people had knowledge of, that the theory of evolution by natural selection contributed nothing to, as far as I can tell.
It was the word natural, right? But not by human intervention, which implies not by divine intervention.
Oh, indeed. So why would you want this theory if it's by natural selection? If you think it's just, this is the way stuff happens, how, like, why do you want that? Allegedly, rhetorically. What's the point of this theory? Why do we say that it's changed everything when in fact, we've been breeding plants for you could say, all right, no, maybe, it spurred people to look for DNA and being able to describe our genetic code. Although apparently, even though we've, described the molecule, we still know much less than we thought we would based on the groupings of the proteins and such like that. And we are, as far as I understand it, nowhere nearer to, generating life out of nothing than we ever had been.
Do you think that was their purpose?
Well, what do you think their purpose? What do you think? So so you could say what Darwin's inspiration for coming up with this theory was, versus why people now like it so much as a description.
I honestly don't know why. It just sounds like as ridiculous as the concept of spontaneous invention.
So we've got some guys in the chat trying to help us. So John Meyer is talking about the issue I have with the word myth is directly related to truth. I consider a myth to be a foundational story. It may be explicitly historically true, but the key is that there is some truth, but not specifically historical truth. And I love the J.R. Tolkien bit about the true myth. Aha! Here, maybe this is the answer. Still John Meyer. The scientific explanation was used to explain things without any need for a divine creator. Well, there you go.
Well, how though? I mean, even if God could have put in motion natural selection, that still doesn't satisfy me as an answer as to why people were so adamant it had to be this.
You would be in harmony with the official position of the church.
No.
which is, there isn't one. There's so, if you're guys, if you want to read up on this, on what the immediate Catholic modern response to the theory of evolution by natural selection was, it's been nothing, right? Apparently, according to two recent books that just
It's
came out,
neutral.
it's neutral. First things just reviewed two books on it, and it's saying there is no official position because
Well,
it's irrelevant.
there seems to be this desire on the part of atheists and atheist scientists, which isn't necessarily the same thing. They don't want to have a aha moment like that. Gotcha. I mean,
Gotcha.
got what?
The
I mean, the
gotcha.
Bible's not a science book. Didn't we cover this with Galileo's trial? It's not a science book.
Oh, yes, we did. And as Augustine, quoted by Galileo, I mean, it's interesting. Galileo knows his stuff, but he still, wants to be like the smart boy in Rome. That Augustine said you shouldn't hang scientific explanations on what Scripture says, because you maybe the explanation changes and you realize the Scripture is still describing something true, you just misunderstood. So
Right.
yeah, there's no aha, got you. It's like, oh, guess what? The theory of evolution by natural selection disproves Genesis. How?
Does it?
Exactly. No, of course it doesn't. This is
God created the world in 7 days. I said God's eternal. What does a day mean to him?
Yeah.
I mean,
So we're not impressed, right? So, but again,
Yeah.
this is so John Abruzzi, neutral. So John Meyer says neutral, no. Irrelevant, yes. Okay, yes. John Abruzzi is saying domestic animal breeding is about one or two characteristics. It doesn't really care about other risks. So you breed cows for milk production. You don't really care if the big udders are uncomfortable. Well, this is true, but I'm also thinking of, there's those famous animal paintings from the 17th or 18th century when they build like bodybuilding cows. They're ridiculously big. These
Are those the oryx? I think Those are the ones
these are
that they went extinct a couple hundred years ago, but they're bringing them back. Yeah, they look like really muscular cows.
I'm not sure. I'm thinking of these paintings, but you can think of also dog breeds. You breed them for lots of different characteristics. Like say whether or not my corgi, who has been sick, who was therefore banished from my recording studio right now.
I know. Poor Pooch.
Whether or not the pure breeds are too inbred to not into. I don't think that what he has is a corgi specific thing. Unfortunately, according to the internet, all the dogs seem to get it. Digestive. But the thing is, people knew that they could selectively breed for stuff long ago, before you had any modeling of genes or something like that. You can understand the processes practically without a theory that explains the mechanism. Okay, so therefore, why does the theory of evolution have such a hold on science? And we've already said it. Because it is a myth.
Yes.
It's even in the terms theory, right? But it's like,
Yeah.
so if it is, why is it so challenging? Why is it so threatening for people to challenge this myth? Again, it kind of answers itself once we set it up this way. It's like, but it's so funny to me because people, the scientists who want this to be true will instantaneously. I did show one of my colleagues on campus one of Vox's posts, and I said, "Are you interested in answering this mathematical discussion?" And he says, "I don't deal with religious loons."
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know whether he knows
Mirror, mirror on the
Vox's.
wall.
Well, loon. It's like it's like no birds here, right? But I thought that was it's an interesting. Why can't you answer this? And he's recognizing that it's going to take place on a level that is threatening in some way. I will say one of the posts that Vox has put up is on how evopsych doesn't work as a science. We've known that.
I'm unfamiliar with the term even.
Well, okay, so I was very interested in evolutionary psychology 20 some years ago. Because one, you have to realize that the thing that was appealing about evolutionary psychology back in the 90s was they were actually arguing for the existence of something, I know you're going to be shocked, called human nature.
You discovered that 20 years ago?
Well, I rediscovered it. Maybe. I mean, I've been reading Adam Ferguson's essay on civilizing society, and it's like apparently the Scottish Enlightenment discovered human nature some time ago, but they rediscovered it at the end of the 20th century, and this was a refreshment because we'd been so trapped by the anthropology that suggested people in different cultures were so radically different that there were multiple natures, right? How many human natures are there? Okay, see, you as a practical person will say, one, aren't we human? Okay,
Right.
so what counts as part of human nature? I know it sounds like a trick question.
Sounds like a trick question. What counts as part of human nature?
Yeah, what counts as human nature? It's living in cities human?
Yes.
Is living by hunter-gathering human?
Yes, but it's the same thing. Just hunt and gather different ways in the city than you do in the country.
Okay, right. But is there a distinction? We're gonna get in all the trouble on the internet. Is there a distinction between the people that live, in grass huts in Africa, in terms of our species nature? Is there an actual difference between the people who live in grass huts in Africa and the people that live in Chicago?
I'm not sure what you mean by actual. I'd say there's no difference in their nature. There's huge differences in their culture.
That's why you didn't do Evo Psych.
I would have failed. Is that what you're saying?
No, what was funny about it is, and the main people involved in it were John Tooby and Lita Cosmides, and they wrote a big book that I read back in the day that was like the beginning textbook on this premise that, guess what, included in human nature is everything human beings have ever done.
That's
right.
ridiculous.
Well, no, but it's actually practical. It's like dog nature includes everything dogs do, right? Human nature includes everything humans do. And they were simple.
Humans have been into space, but anyway.
Yeah, but we make stuff that's, well, if we've been into space. We're tool making animals that think in particular way. It's like
Tool making animal. Okay, yeah.
They were just trying to come up with
mammals.
What was funny about it was they were trying to come up with a description within anthropology that would encompass everything that anthropologists had been describing for the past 100 years about different cultures. And
yeah, I think in 1989 was about the last time I took a class in anthropology, so that explains why maybe I just missed it.
Yeah, it sort of came up in the 90s as a sort of argument, and it was originally just meant to be inclusively descriptive of if we're going to explain humanity and say we have instincts for this, that, or the other, we have to include all of this evidence, which again is what Adam Ferguson said back in 1767 or so. It's like we've known this conceptually, but when I started reading all of this, and I'm like, oh, this is great. It's like human nature. We can just sort of think, holistically about what it is to be human. One of my friends in anthropology said, oh, you don't want to read that. It's all just so stories. And I'm like, what?
What does that mean? What's a just so story?
Ah, okay. So those of us who grew up reading a lot of Rudyard Kipling, like the Jungle Book stories, and If, right? Everybody in the internet can recite If. Well, Kipling also wrote a series of sort of pseudo animal myths, which were things like how the leopard got his spots and why the cat walks alone. Those are the two that I remember. So why the cat walks alone, it's the story about how the cat wheedles its way into the cave with the woman. It's really funny because the cat comes up and says, oh, just give me some of that milk. And she's like, well, I need the milk for my baby. And the cat says, well, if you do this or that, I'll play with the baby. And she's like, okay, so she'll give you the milk. And the next day the cat comes and says, let me, sit by the curtain in the cave. And she's like, well, blah, blah, blah. And the cat wheedles its way into the cave. And the man comes home from hunting with the dog and says, what's that cat doing in here? So they're sort of, they're funny. Like how the elephant got his trunk is when the baby elephant is going down to the bank, and the crocodile or alligator, I can't remember which one it is, persuades the elephant to stick his trunk in the water, and the elephant grabs onto his trunk and pulls, right? And so it's actually Kipling's writing these in the early 20th century, and they're kind of like spoofs on evolution. because they're these
Oh,
practical stories of like, well, or now I'm remembering more of them. Where armadillos come from is that the turtle and the porcupine were trading abilities that they have, and the turtle could swim and the porcupine could roll itself up in a ball, and so they practice, and the porcupine starts swimming, and eventually its quills all mesh, and the turtle starts practicing like unhinging its plates and rolling up into a ball, and eventually you end up with an armadillo.
that's complicated.
But with my friend in anthropology, when I was super psyched on this Evo Psych stuff for a year or two, and she's like, stop reading those Just So stories. It was, and this is, Vox is correct when he says this, they were all like, well, we can do this because it was an adaptation. All right, so why do women let cats into the cave? Oh, because it's an adaptation.
Okay.
But really, I mean, that's the problem with it as a field. But it was, it got some. I was aware of it because it was getting traction in things like, why is religion socially adaptive? They liked making stories about how religion makes people more social, and that living socially is more conducive to having more offspring, and so because that's adaptive, that's why we're religious.
Why did your friend say don't read those Just So stories? What was her reason?
Because she didn't think they explained anything. She said they're like Kipling's stories, and that
Yeah.
they simply
Yeah, I can see that. It sounds like an excuse after the fact, so that you don't have to actually think about
that she
how
didn't want
things
to. Well, she was
happen.
actually in anthropology, right? And she was working on
No,
people in Papua New Guinea and different
yeah.
cultures of storytelling
I'm just
and
saying
things
it
like
sounds
that.
like, yeah, it sounds it's that's just saying that's an adaptation at everything is a presumption. Of
That's the
course,
point, right?
yeah,
That's
evolution was a presumption.
but this is so at that level of what you came up with is, why do they like tens? Because it's because of eugenics, right? But generally evolution became, well, here we've got some pictures. Here's an evolution. It starts off as, oh, I can't see it, a sproutosar, and then it
Sprotosaur.
goes to a bloomsar, and its final form is a bulbasaur. The Pokemon, this was my favorite because you could say all they can say is their name. So like Bulbasaur, Bulbasaur. I like that one. That they go from their simpler version to their more developed version, and that kind of evolution, that sort of narrative of here, how do they reach their final form, that fits with in evolutionary psychology. This is why my friend was cautioning me against it. It explains everything and nothing, because whatever is adaptive, and whatever whatever was clearly adaptive, because that's where we are now.
Clearly,
It's the kind of thing that makes stories about why women like shopping.
because we're gatherers.
You fell for the Just So story. See, this is the people that study. Okay, but you recognize the problem of all of this is we know nothing about any of these people. All we have are these kinds of stories. Oh, well, we've observed the people in Africa in the 19th century who hunt and gather. That must be the way our primitive ancestors lived. We don't know that.
No, we don't.
I mean,
No,
it's
we
like
don't.
there's all this back projection of like everybody alive now is modern, including the people living in the grass huts.
Yeah, it's really hard to find hard evidence of how people lived through archaeology. It's kind of really lucky when you find something very well preserved.
Right, but you don't. But until we have history, we have no explanations even of. I mean, no matter how like perspectively focused they are, or anything like that, without history, and there, the first a lot of the earliest stuff we have from history is of course myths, but without any stories from people, we don't know what those objects are. It's another like great joke in well, it is a joke for me with archaeology and anthropology. If you don't know what it is, it's a ritual object.
That's right up there for me with, if we don't know what this monolithic thing is, it's an observatory. like every single
It
time.
always is. And you go to the
Yeah.
museums, possibly a ritual object. It's like, you don't know what that is. It could be a
Yeah, that
toy.
annoys me too.
Oh, well,
That's
those dolls, those are idols. And you're like, or they could be dolls, or that, we don't know. And the thing is, unless we have writing and therefore the information from another human mind about what this object is, we completely don't know what they are.
Yeah, there are these objects they found all over northwestern Europe, in particular. That there are these tiny little. They look like they look like D&D dice. Actually, they've got holes in them and spikes, and they're about yay big,
Mm.
And nobody knows what these things are, and everybody's guessing because nobody's ever written about them, but they're everywhere.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of them.
And so your job in that discipline, because people like stories, right? We
Yeah.
want stories now, so we're going to stick a story onto this. I mean, my favorite version of this is David Macaulay's Motel of the Mysteries. Do you remember seeing that
No,
ever?
I haven't heard of that.
It was so he was great. He did all these great books on how things work. They're like a lot of really like intricate diagram drawings, and he did things like on building the cathedral and building the underground of the cities, or all the stuff that's under the roads, the infrastructure and such. But
Mm-hmm.
as a spoof, he did one. It's like, okay, so the pollution all collapses and and buries the world, the United States particularly, under feet and feet and feet and stuff. And the only thing that's left sticking out are these signs. It's all done in drawings, right? And so the signs are like the interstate signs. So
Yeah.
you have, it's like the Sphinx when it gets buried up to its neck in sand, right? So the interstate signs are there, and they dig down and they excavate this motel, which we would recognize a motel. But they go through it all, and they find the outer chamber and the inner chamber, and in the outer chamber there's the altar of whatever, so it's the bed facing the television or something, and you go in the inner chamber, it's the bathroom. And
Yeah.
the funniest one is when he has the wife of the excavator wearing the toilet seat as jewelry, and and it's meant to be a spoof on Schliemann's wife putting on the Troy, the
Oh,
jewelry from Troy. And it's like, yeah, we don't know what this is. It's a
yeah.
sacred space.
No idea.
It's clearly a sacred tomb, and there was a whole city of these sacred tombs, because of course when the pollution fell, everybody died. So it's like they all get entombed in their hotel rooms.
Yeah.
Uh,
A tomb. That's funny.
but it's a really good parody on this problem that we have if we find it in any of these contexts. Burial context could mean a lot of different things. You could be burying a child with toys. You could be burying them with protective deities. You could, who knows?
Oh yeah, yeah. There were a couple of memes that went around last year about there. Gosh, I hope they were just memes because this is like super dumb. That they would excavate soldiers that had been buried and they're thousands of years old and somewhere in northern Europe, and it was like a Viking funeral or something, and there was a doll with this man. So they said this is a trans soldier,
Okay.
and of course the memes were flowing, like the spice, and it's like can you imagine, your daddy dies in battle and you love him and you want to be brave, so you put your
So
doll
you
with
give
your
him
daddy.
you give your daddy the doll. Okay. So we see the perils of making this
Yeah.
kind of a story about immediate history, right? A few thousand years ago. Why don't we see the perils of making the and recognizing that okay, so the fossil record is complicated, and I want to know, and this is I do really have this problem of exactly how fossils. Why are there any fossils? As far as I'm concerned, they seem to have to happen when something goes like the Motel of the Mysteries. Everything, like the sediment layer falls instantly, because otherwise, wouldn't the bodies just rot? I'm missing something, right? Guys, if you know how fossils form, or did all the dinosaurs fall into a big mud pit?
Some of them did fall into tar pits.
The tar pits I
Some of
get,
them-
right? Those are
Yeah.
like mummies. Those are a little more like
Yeah.
mummies.
Yeah, it could have been just anaerobic. I mean, there are human bodies that are still sometimes pulled out of bogs in Ireland and Denmark, I think,
with their throats slit, or
with their throats cut. Yeah,
or
either hanged or
they're
with their throats
hanged or
cut.
with their throat slits, and these are clearly sacrifices.
Right, but the bodies are incredibly well preserved.
Correct, but the dinosaur bones are allegedly millions of years old. Those are a few thousand years old.
I wonder how long the flesh stayed on them, though.
You're not helping me here.
I'm sorry. I do like speculating about these things.
As do the people who study, paleontology and evolution and such like that. It's like, okay, so we, we've to a certain extent established we're going to make stories up about stuff given the opportunity. We're going to make just so stories up about why things are the way they are given the opportunity. They may be adaptive, like this, the little elephant needed its long trunk in order to get away from the alligator. And yet the people who Vox is arguing with insist that evolution is scientifically true.
But that's ridiculous. It's still a theory.
Sorry.
I did it again.
Why
Sorry.
is it so appealing? Vox does not like why. I like why. Why is it so hard to convince people of what we seem to be able to get without any trouble, right? It's like one of our friends in DCR said, I don't even need to read this book to know that it strikes me as intuitively right. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. For those of us, it's either intuitively right or intuitively wrong. It doesn't take, this mathematical or not mathematical proof. So what is it about the theory that has made it have such sticking power?
They want it to be true.
Why?
The question is, why do they want
Why
it
do
to
they
be
want
true?
it to be true? What kind of
So
story is
yeah.
it? I did give you something to read on this.
Yeah, Vox isn't going to be successful with them, even though he can prove it mathematically. If he says he can prove it mathematically, I believe him.
I'm fine with that. It's like the thing is, it's actually not that difficult of a proof if you're just saying like the time scale, the amount of time we've observed to fix mutations, to these things don't match up. Okay, I'm done. Right. So it's not mathematically that difficult to get. Why is it something that they're so invested? I've also sort of skimmed around in the internet. I found a Facebook page that was talking about the book, and the comments on that were basically, well, Vox is a sci-fi author. Here's a sci-fi story. We don't need to read it. It's silly. So they're not even curious.
Closed-minded.
Well, but okay.
They're not curious of anybody that's going to challenge them. No, because that's a personality type.
But it's most people.
I want to read this really, really quickly. You gave me chapter 6 of Newman's book to read.
That's a different part of the argument. Okay, but yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
But listen to this. This is somebody in ancient Rome. It might be Tacitus, describing his disgust at Christians. Read this, says Paley. After quoting some of the most beautiful and subduing passages of St. Paul, read this must be Julian the Apostate, and then think of the excitabilis superstitio, and he goes on to express a wish. In contending with heathen authorities to produce our books against theirs, we need to counter them. This is a beautiful passage. People are going to be fooled by this. Let's start producing books. He goes on to say that's not going to do any good, but because the common man isn't going to read them. But yeah.
Okay, but for the other thing I gave to read was by C.S. Lewis, and it's saying it was first published in 1998, but that doesn't make any sense because C.S. Lewis died in 1963. Okay, so here we have, this is from God in the Dock, quote, "The funeral of a great myth, evolution."
Yeah.
So it's like we've been calling it out for a very long time now, but I think Lewis calls it out far more effectively than maybe, I don't know about Vox, but more recent efforts at it, with the clear understanding of why people were so attached to it. One, Lewis claims, so says the clearest and finest, for one, it's not in fact invented by Darwin. He says the clearest and finest poetical expressions of the myth come before The Origin of Species was published in 1859. So he's saying Darwin himself is already participating in the myth by the time he writes his book. So it's not that Darwin invents this at all. It's something that comes out of the moment. And the example he gives is this uh, poem, but the principal premise that he gives is that it's it, okay, so in science, and he credits it saying, popular evolutionism is different from scientific evolutionism, that science is just a theory. Well, yeah, but people hold on to it because it's something else. In science, evolution is a theory about changes, okay, how one species changed in another. But in the myth, it is a fact about improvements. And this is my first thing that I say, that I think why do you want natural selection? Not even do you want natural selection taking the mechanism away from God, because you can't tell why the species changes, like the natural selection. So nature no, what you want is a guarantee that everything's going to get better.
Better by whose definition?
Just better. Come on, the Bulbasaur is better than the Sproutosaur. He's bigger, he's stronger. Bulbasaur, come on. The Pokemon evolve, and it's like when we talk, this is the cartoon version of everything, right? The Pokemon evolve to stronger, better versions of themselves, which is the point of eugenics, right? You said that.
Might makes right.
Well, maybe with Bulbasaur, but the basically,
in general, in myth,
think about, right? The appeal of the myth is everything gets better. And it's not Darwin who says this. The survival of the fittest is not his phrase, but if you have evolution by natural selection, and only the ones that are able to survive in their new environment are surviving, then the stuff that has become, lives now to the present is the better stuff. And he says this, not merely terrestrial organisms, but everything is moving onwards and upwards. And you can see this is the way in which people have been arguing politically for the last, since we know it's like, I thought we'd evolved beyond X, Y, or Z, right? I thought, we've evolved beyond believing that sex is just binary. We've evolved believing that, women should, actually take care of their own children. We've evolved. You realize that
right.
the power of the imagery is always in the improvement. It's literally the progressive myth we are going to evolve into. So he says, reason has evolved out of instinct, virtue out of complexes, poetry out of erotic howls and grunts. I mean, that kind of thing comes up a lot, or it's like, where does music come from? Oh, well, it starts with, animal cries, right? Civilization out of savagery, the organic out of the inorganic, the solar system out of some sidereal soup or traffic block. And conversely, reason, virtue, art, and civilization, as we now know them, are only the crude or embryonic beginnings of far better things, perhaps deity itself in the remote future. Think about the way they're arguing for AI. It's the next stage of our evolution.
Our evolution? But yeah, well,
Bulbasaur, right? It's like we're going to go from being human beings to Bulbasaurs, and that's that's the point of the Pokemon. Have you watched Pokemon? I only like them because we used to draw
My child
them.
was born a bit later.
Well, you missed the evolution, right? What's funny is they do evolve. Each species of Pokemon evolves into it's got 3 forms, and they get bigger and stronger. Charizard turns into a big, flying dragon and stuff. That the evolution is this transformation to greater power, always.
All right, now we're back into eugenics.
Yes.
Which I guess started really in the early 18th century, right? Isn't that when that Reverend wrote, what the heck was it? It's actually an English Reverend that wrote about controlling the population. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name right now. Yes, Malthus. That might have been 18th century, but yeah. Around the time these theories are becoming popular.
Well, he's the one that gives them the mechanism of population pressure, I think.
Yeah.
So yes. So okay. So John Abrisi saying the issue is the worldview, or no, that's John Meyer. Materialism is the key. We have to be progressing rather than recovering from a fall. Exactly, right? The
Mm.
evolution, it's not only natural, but it's positive. It's we're going from, and but where are they progressing to? Well, indeed. So Lewis plays off. He tries playing the large version of this myth, which is very well demonstrated by this tree of evolution with man at the top. Um, this is the way Lewis tells the myth, right? The drama proper is preceded, um, in Wagnerian terms, right, by the most austere of all preludes, the infinite void, and matter endlessly, aimlessly moving to bring forth it knows not what, right? So if you don't have the creator in any context, you just have the void, the infinite void of
Then you can project
whatever.
anything you want onto it.
Then by some millionth chance, what tragic irony, the conditions at one point of space and time bubble up into that tiny fermentation which we call organic life. At first, everything seems to be against the infant hero of our drama, just as everything always was against the seventh son or ill-used stepdaughter in a fairy tale. But life somehow wins through. With incalculable sufferings, the sorrows of the Volsungs were nothing to it, against all but insuperable obstacles, it spreads, it breeds, it complicates itself, from the amoeba up to the reptile, up to the mammal. Life! Here comes our first climax. Wanton as in her prime. This is the age of monsters. Dragons prowl the earth, devour one another, and die. Then the old irresistible theme of the younger son or the ugly duckling is repeated, as the weak, tiny spark of life herself began amidst the beasts that are far larger and stronger than he. There comes forth a little naked, shivering, cowering biped, shuffling, not yet fully erect, promising nothing, the product of another millionth chance. His name in this myth is man. And Haeckel, this tree of life is very famous. Haeckel, with all the different organisms of man at the very top, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are the culmination of evolution. Elsewhere,
How does he know?
because we're part of the myth. Come on. Elsewhere,
Sorry.
he has been the young Beowulf whom men at first thought a dastard, or the stripling David armed only with a sling against mail-clad Goliath, or Jack the giant killer himself, or even Hop o' My Thumb. He thrives. He begins killing his giants. He becomes the caveman with his flints and his club, muttering and growling over his enemy's bones. Almost a brute, yet somehow able to invent art. That's what's funny. Yeah, these cavemen that invent art, right? Pottery, language, weapons, cookery, and nearly everything else. His name in another story is Robinson Crusoe. Dragging his screaming mate by her hair. I do not know exactly why. Chesterton has a wonderful, in The Everlasting Man, he has this thing saying, like, the only thing we actually know about the cavemen is he's artistic. Because they paint the pictures in Lascaux, right? So, gee, they were really good at art, at drawing. And why do we think that they were brutal to their women? Who knows?
Why do we think they dragged them by their hair into a cave? That's just so specific.
Tearing his children to pieces in fierce jealousy. They're clearly reading Greek myths until they are old enough to tear him, or maybe they're reading Freud. Because that's Totem and Taboo with the Moses myth is like it's supposed to come out of the murder of the father, and cowering before the terrible gods whom he has invented in his own image. But these were only growing pains. In the next act, he becomes true man. He learns to master nature. Science arises. And remember, of course, in this mythology, of course, we always have to be evolved from the stupid past. So those stupid Middle Ages.
Past. Yeah, the Dark Ages.
The Dark Ages.
Thank you.
Science arises and dissipates the superstitions of his infancy. And again, reading Newman and talking about it's like with the ancients worrying about Christianity as superstition. You see why we have to get rid of that superstition, because that's just superstition. More and more, he becomes the controller of his own fate. Always, always, always what we want in these stories is the power to control, right? Which is what you picked up on the eugenics, right? Passing hastily over the historical period, in it the upward and onward movement gets in places a little indistinct, but it is mere nothing by the time scale we are using. We follow our hero on into the future. See him in the last act, though not the last scene of this great mystery. A race of demigods now rule the planet, in some versions the galaxy. Remember, Tolkien and Lewis both like read science, space opera, right? They get it. Eugenics have made certain that only demigods will now be born. Psychoanalysis that none of these shall lose smirt or smirch his divinity. Economics that they shall have to hand all that demigods require. Man has ascended his throne. Man has become God. All is a blaze of glory. And now, mark well the final stroke of mythopoeic genius. It is only the more debased versions of the myth that end here. For to end here is a little pathetic, even a little vulgar. If we stopped at this point, the story would lack the highest grandeur. Therefore, in the best versions, the last scene reverses all. Arthur died, Siegfried died, Roland died at Roncesvalles. Dusk steals darkly over the gods. All this time we have forgotten Mordred, Hagen, Ganelon. All this time nature, the old enemy who only seemed to be defeated, has been gnawing away silently, unceasingly, out of the reach of human power. The sun will cool. All suns will cool. The whole universe will run down. Life, every form of life, will be banished without hope of return from every cubic inch of infinite space. All ends in nothingness. Universal darkness covers all. True to the shape of Elizabethan tragedy, the hero has swiftly fallen from the glory to which he slowly climbed. We are dismissed in calm of mind, all passion spent. It is indeed much better than Elizabethan tragedy, for it has a more complete finality. It brings us to the end, not of a story, but of all possible stories. Enden sah ich die Welt. I saw the end of the world. That's actually, the thing is, I think people actually do want it to go that far. It's like we reach our glory, we become demigods, and then it collapses, right? It's
nothing,
like,
and then Twilight of the Gods.
and then Twilight of the Gods, and then nothing happens. That it is, like this arc from infinite void to man as demigod to universal darkness.
As an aspiration?
Well, all of that is part of the myth. And yes, I do think actually myths are myths. I mean, the opposite of that myth is the heavenly Jerusalem and everything made new and we're all happy in heaven praising God, right? Well, if you don't have that version of things, what's going to happen? Heat death. And you see that scientifically we are stupid and superstitious to believe that there's anything other than heat death on our horizon. You know, the sun is going to burn out in gazillion billion years. Ha ha ha. I do feel like people.
Thank God, I thought you said a million. Yeah.
Well, no, it's like here's Yggdrasil, right? The real tree that we're talking about. That what Lewis's point is that the appeal of evolution is the appeal of this myth of both progress and actual
what could be the appeal?
Tragedy.
It's like nobody can ever do better than me. Therefore, curtains down.
Yeah. We're gonna make it, but that's it, right? That's as far as we get. Faust, right? It's like the right. So, how effective is saying your math doesn't work going to be against this story?
It's not. This is why you got the first response of, I don't talk to religious loons. I don't read that.
Yes, that one
it's
of my
projection, because the loony part is holding on to a myth as if it were dogma, and making anathema anybody who would question it.
Right, but what I'm thinking is like, I maybe phrase it a different way. Why would anybody think math can defeat the myth? Tricky,
well, I mean, you might think math can.
Why would anybody think math could defeat? I mean, this is it's a myth of origins and meaning and structure. And I'm going to come along and show you your math doesn't work because your time frame is off.
And the anthropologists were going to come along and show these people why their society was wrong and how it could be fixed, right? To the primitive tribes.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think that's what Vox's point is. He's trying to prove that the scientists don't do science.
Well, he can do that, but he won't be talking to scientists. When he'll be talking to the people who read the scientists, like me and other non-scientists.
Right, but why can't the scientists hear him? Why? It's like it's like why won't?
Because they're not Spock. They're not logical.
Oh.
They're human. They're faulty. They have egos. It's a thing.
Okay, but why would anybody? It's like the Spock thing. Why? There is a funny trick here that I'm trying to get you to share with me. One weird trick, right? Why would anyone think that math can defeat the myth? John's saying only those truly
Why would
looking
anybody
will
think
care.
logic can defeat emotion?
There. Why would anybody think math can defeat the myth? What's the great myth that we're living by?
The great myth.
Yeah. How do we know what's true? This Lewis has this very interesting little plane here saying, he grew up believing the myth, but he's sort of thinking about why the myth is going to work. The basic idea of the myth that smaller, chaotic, or feeble things perpetually turn themselves into large, strong, ordered things is the one of the things. But in order to believe the myth, you have to treat reason as an absolute. But at the same time, the myth asks me to believe that reason is simply the unforeseen and unintended byproduct of a mindless process at one stage of its endless and aimless becoming. The content of the myth thus knocks from under me the only ground on which I could possibly believe the myth to be true. If my own mind is a product of the irrational, if what seem my clearest reasonings are the only way in which a creature conditioned as I am is bound to feel, how shall I trust my mind when it tells me about evolution?
What fascinates me about this is he believed that when he was an atheist.
Mm.
He believed the myth when he was an atheist. When he was no
Yes.
longer an atheist, he no longer believed that myth.
Right. But the underlying myth that all of this is of reason. And you're saying, I started, this episode with, it's like, we're worrying about how do we know what is true. And so, in challenging that myth about how change happens and that, that everything, the emotional valence of it being, and the stuff that we have at the present is good. We have a primary trust in the present for mathematical proofs. Maybe it'll help if I show a mathematical proof. Here's a mathematical proof, or part of one, right? Everybody read it?
Nope.
Here, I can't see
my mind.
screen,
My mind turns to spaghetti when I see that.
Mean, this is what I love about this is most people love the idea that things can be mathematically true, but do they even know what that means? What is a mathematical proof? And I got on this. I got on this tack. I'm trying to stay close to the microphone so you guys can hear me. Because when Newman was talking about how do we judge ideas to be true, he kept saying that he was doing something that was different from a mathematical proof. Because for example, he's talking about ideas that are, would say, when an idea, whether real or not, is of a nature to interest and possess the mind, it is said to have life, that is, to live in the mind which is the recipient of it. Thus, mathematical ideas, real as they are, cannot be called living, for they have no influence and lead to nothing. And I'm like, what? Well, so there's a very clear, and I think Newman actually studied mathematics, so he did actually know what he was talking about. That
must be talking about theoretical mathematics then.
Well, actual mathematical proofs, which this, what I'm showing you on screen is actually one of, right? That they go from, he says, and the kinds of ideas that he's going to be talking about, he's not talking about developments, mathematical developments, because he says, next it is plain that mathematical developments, that is, the system of truths drawn out from mathematical definitions or equations, do not fall under our present subject, though altogether analogous to it. Particularly because Newman is worried about how ideas not just develop, but whether or not they become corrupt, right? How can a development be a corruption as opposed to, and this being the two the poles of change would be either idea can have started out well and then be corrupted, or maybe start out small and gotten more developed and bigger. He says there can be no corruption in such development in mathematical ideas because they are conducted on strict demonstration. and the conclusions in which they terminate, being necessary, cannot be declensions from the original idea. Let me see if I can make that a little simpler. In a mathematical proof, you start with a definition. This is for example, a proof or description from alternative join and slice constructions. And it's from set theory. So in 128, we introduced the join functor star on simplicial sets. In 44, Joyle introduces a closely related operation. Okay, they use all this notation because you have to be able to mark stuff with symbols. So diamond shape.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing
on
because
simplicial sets. This operation is equivalent to star, proposition 4212, but is technically more convenient in certain contexts. In this section, we will review the definition of the operation diamond and establish some of its basic properties. See also 44 for just... I just read the first paragraph. I haven't even gotten to the definition.
I'm sorry. You may as well be speaking I don't know,
a different language.
I don't speak.
It's a different language, and what I understand from the person who gave me this particular proof is, a good deal of what it's a good deal of what mathematicians are doing is defining things clearly so that they can then discover their properties, which are all in, they're, he explained it to me. The definition isn't actually necessary for the proof. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you've ruined me now, because I thought at least I was getting somewhere with this, that it can be, it's helpful and descriptive, but the proof can happen without it. Definition 4211. Let X and Y be simplicial sets. The simplicial set X diamond Y is defined to be push out. I can't even read this out loud. I don't know. It's symbol speak, right? We note that since X times Y times, I forgot what that, derivative delta 1 goes to X times Y times delta 1 is a monomorphism. The push-out diagram defining X times Y is a homotopy push-out and set triangle with respect to the Joyle modal structure. Consequently, we deduce that categorical equivalence is X to X prime, Y to Y prime, and use a categorical equivalence X diamond Y to X prime diamond Y. Okay.
I'm going to have nightmares tonight about my junior year in high school.
This is we never discovered math at this level, right? I say I loved math because you start with one thing, you do a bunch of operations on it, and you find something that's equal to.
That was my theory too, but it never worked out like that.
Well, it did until I got to this level. I mean, this is higher level than I did, but before I got to analysis, and then you realize they are. Okay, I have another example that you will understand. For example, theology.
You assume.
Okay, look, mathematical truths, as in my most basic way as a theologian understand them, they're demonstrations by proof. You have a definition and a demonstration that then proves the equation, the equal, right? They're not developments
I understand the concept,
in time.
yeah.
Yeah, so you start with an axiom, and the thing that comes from it is meant to be, premised on the axiom, and therefore you can demonstrate that it's attached to it. Most people think that what's interesting is even if you don't have that as a practice, you're thinking that you're able to do this level of mathematical demonstration.
Mm-hmm.
It's present at more levels than most people realize. For example, in talking about developments of Christian doctrine, which is where I started with, what is my next picture? Oh yes, here we go. Christian doctrine. So every single time you get trapped in an argument with a Protestant, or usually trapped in an argument with a Protestant, it's happened to me with Catholics too, and you're trying to establish whether something is true in Christianity, where is the default place that they want to start?
The default place in a theological argument that a Protestant wants to start?
Yep.
They want to start in Scripture.
There you go. Okay, so here is the way, and this, what's funny about that is we think of the sola scriptura proof as particularly Protestant. Here's a Catholic using it. And this is a Catholic I've actually studied a bit. It's Cornelius a Lapide, who is a Jesuit commentator on scripture in the early 17th century. And
Hmm.
he's trying to explain how you get to theological proof, theological truths, and that they always start from scripture, because his big thing was doing commentary on scripture. And I've written
Mhm.
about him as someone in the age of print who's doing these big aggregate commentaries on the Gospels, for example. Here, the way the proof happens. Holy Scripture, says Cornelius, contains the beginnings of all theology. For theology is nothing but the science of conclusions which are drawn from principles certain to faith, and therefore is all of sciences most august as well as certain. That's theology. But the principles of faith and faith itself doth Scripture contain. Whence it evidently follows that Holy Scripture lays down those principles of theology by which the theologian begets of the mind's reasoning his demonstrations. And then he concludes, he then who thinks he can tear away scholastic science from the work of commenting on Holy Scripture is hoping for offspring without a mother. But here he says, it follows that Holy Scripture lays down those principles of theology, so the axioms. He wants to do this basically mathematically. So I'd say
Yeah.
the why Vox and others, and Vox says that people tried to in 1966 deal with the mathematics behind the theory, and it didn't explode it then, right? Because the biologists went just like, oh, never mind, right? That that the premise that math can destroy the myth is actually a theologically practical claim, because it's the expectation. Well, we've got these axioms in Scripture, and theologians work from those principles of theology with the mind's reasonings to make a demonstration of what the doctrine actually is. So you've been doing math all along. You just didn't know it.
I'm a genius. Yay.
Right. So, we should, and this is like, why won't the math work? Okay, so to convince all the Protestants they're wrong, all we have to do is cite Scripture at them, right?
No.
How's that
That
working out?
usually
for you?
backfires,
How's
actually.
that working out for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Pretty spectacularly.
It
because it's
doesn't
exactly
work.
the same thing. They don't want it to. And it's the same thing. They don't want it to. They have their precious, and they're going to hold on to it.
Interestingly, and the demonstration from axiom to, with clear reasoning and proof doesn't work. So the irony of all that is that what Newman is trying to do in his essay is convince himself to convert to Catholicism.
Oh, interesting.
So he's going, I mean, it's like, this is a giant, it's an elaborate proof for himself to say, the church that I want to join because of all my studies and my arguing as an Anglican about, the truths of Christianity, has brought me to this understanding that, in fact, the continuity, and this is a, sort of argument of, we're arguing about issues of change and continuity, that what evolution wants is change progressively for the better, right? By natural selection, we're always going to survive to those things that survive are better adapted to their environment, and therefore that adaptation is appropriate, and that appropriate adaptation is what we get in the present, so it's good, right? What Newman conversely is trying to convince himself is those developments that we've seen in Christianity that we see in Catholicism now, things like papal primacy and Marian doctrines and purgatory and weekly mass and confession and all of these things that the Protestants reject. He's trying to convince himself that no, those are actually in identity with the original version of Christianity. It's just been developing like a tree.
Okay.
I'm catching up the comments while you think about that.
Okay.
Okay, Robert Montgomery's talking about commentary and tradition, circular if not grounded in tradition. Math is in the metaphysical concept. So this is what what's interesting about it's like mathematical proof, but it is the kind of demonstration that everybody wants to make because we feel that it has a character of truth that other kinds of demonstration don't. Um, but it would, the problem is whether that set theory stuff can translate into anything either we can understand or that it actually explains something of our existence. The friend of mine who was helping me think about that set proof was saying one of the things that's happening in those definitions is trying to decide what's essential and inessential in the construction. And that made more sense when he said it to me. That this happens when you talk to mathematicians, like all this stuff makes sense until you're not talking to them anymore, and then you're like, poof. Right? Wait a minute, that made sense while we were talking. But part of that is because it's hard to latch them on to reality of other sorts, right? They exist in this mathematical realm of operations with, I mean, this is algebraic geometry, so it's both points and space. But it's harder to translate, as Newman says, into things that actually, live and develop. It's not, your understanding of math could grow, but the math itself just is. I hope I've made that right. No, math, Montgomery say math, we discover it. It feels, mathematicians talk about it's more like it's already out there and you're finding it rather than it's developing.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all. It's not a physical thing. You're talking about it as a philosophy.
It's not a physical thing. It's actually, the thing is, I think its strongest analog is actually theology. I've come around now to the scholastics, and I think I understand them now. They're doing math. Scholastic theology, it's always been strange to me because I'm like, why do they care, right? They're making these demonstrations of, definitions that then have these entailments of properties, and I'm just like, okay, what?
There have been physicists that have become Christian, become baptized. I wonder if through their work in science, but I wonder if any mathematicians ever done that.
Oh,
I mean, there have been Christians who were mathematicians, but has there ever been an atheist that became a Christian because of the study of math?
I'm certain there are, but they don't get the same splash because they don't have the mage power that physicists do.
Well, to me, it's easier for me to wrap my head around physical things. Like, people are studying physics, they're studying space, they see something physical, an object, or the absence of something that should be there but isn't, but everything still works around it. And they think that doesn't happen by accident. And then they start thinking about theology. So it's kind of like a gateway.
Well, they're going from creation to the creator.
Right, to the creator. So what does somebody studying math, how do they do that if it's not an object?
Well, I think what happened in the 12th and 13th centuries is they get a bunch of mathematics along with their Aristotle, and the men who are very interested in the mathematics tend to also do high theology, and I think it's because it seems like divine realities.
I'm laughing at myself, not you. I'm like, I'm trying to keep up. Yeah.
Well, I'd say, the proof by mathematics, the desire is that it has a concrete reality that is unassailable. But the problem is that it's operating at you want the mathematical demonstration to be persuasive in a way that it's actually not suited for. I think is my concern.
It's an intangible truth applied to tangible things.
Yeah, maybe it's like we're trying to talk about actual animals. and how
or
they
their
how
or
how
their
they exist.
mutations.
Well,
Yeah.
so it's but I'd say it the my best demonstration of why it's not going to work is because sola scriptura never does. Oh, if you're trying to change people's minds about theology, banging them over the head with verses of scripture never works.
Well, you can't. The only thing you can point out is the absence of sola scriptura in the scriptures.
Well, that, but not disproving sola scriptura or not, because Cornelius is saying, look, you need to start from scripture, and theology works from, Holy Scripture lays down the principles of theology by which the theologian begets of the mind's reasoning his demonstrations. You have to have already accepted scripture before you can do any of this. I mean, it's like, and I'd say with the mathematics, to go back to my set theory image, right? One, you have to be able to understand that definition to even get anywhere, right? It's like you have to be able to grasp the idea of that axiom. And I'd say the same is difficulty with Christian doctrine. There's, this is why eventually they all default to, oh, it's revelation. Because what? How can I get myself to see this axiom, this reality? Oh, and then all these other things, follow on from it. But if you can't get your mind around that axiom to start with, the demonstrations are not going to help. I have the problem, I think. Wait, John Meyer is saying the main problem is the audience for the argument or the proof. Well, I think it's yes, and audience is part of what I'm dealing with here, but it's also the what kind of definitions or beginning points do people find persuasive? That's it. No, it's I remember our parent question here is, why do we believe things are true? And you say, okay, so that's it. It's like, why do you believe things are true? What things present themselves to us as acceptable, as starting points for arguments? So realizing that in this situation, we're turning artificial versus natural is a pair that we've come up with already, and saying that theory of evolution by natural selection. So it should be something that is, ironically, it's about life. So it's organic and it grows and it's about growth. And in fact, the entire theory of evolution is about, it is in fact about life, because that's the whole point of it. If you have an organic idea about change, you're going to start with something little, like a seed, and it's going to grow and it's going to die. And you realize that's exactly what Lewis did in that myth, right? It's like we start with this little thing, this seed. We don't know where the seed comes from, but that's okay. Seed, right? Oh, it grows, it develops into the big complicated thing it is, and then it dies. Now, the other option for change is something that is purposefully made, right? You take, if there's like and this is why, when you said at the beginning, it's like we use this theory of evolution by natural selection to change society. Well, is society something that grows or is made?
I think the people who wanted to change it think it's something that's made.
It is something that's made. This is what's ironic about the whole use of the theory to argue progress, right? It's like it's the going back to the evopsych arguments. It's like, what is what are human beings' nature to do? Well, one of our big primary things is make stuff. Objects that then we can either make well according to the idea that we have, or badly according to the idea that we have, and then other people can come along and mess up, corrupt. Which is, this is, so I realize this is when Newman, I promised in the promo for this tonight that we use St. John Henry Newman's tree of doctrine to prove evolution is a myth. What's interesting about he's trying to figure out how he can know ideas are true, And the answer that he comes to is uh, theology is seed-like and grows like a tree, right? And that's what I quoted last week when Tolkien loves this idea that Christian doctrine grows from a seed at the beginning to this magnificent tree, and it's organic and it grows, and therefore the identity is from little to big, but it's because of its growth. Whereas what Newman was answering his concerns about, because he had been a Protestant and he'd been convinced that, I mean, some of the stuff he says about the Catholic Church is hilarious. Didn't I read some of that last week? Where he was saying it was all like satanic and horrible. Yeah. Yeah. In 1834, I also used of certain doctrines of the Church of Rome the epithets unscriptural, profane, impious, bold, unwarranted, blasphemous, gross, monstrous, cruel, administering deceitful comfort, and unauthorized. I do not, in track 38, I do not mean to say that I had not a definite meaning in every one of these epithets, or I did not weigh them before I used them, but I'm sorry, right? That what he was mainly concerned with is that human intervention had somehow come in and corrupted and broken and made badly this thing that he now recognizes as a natural growth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the evolution of theology is anathematized. Good point. I also realized that one of the things that makes it difficult for current Catholics to hear Newman's theory of development is we've gone through Vatican II, or at least I was born that year, but it's that changing the doctrine in a way that feels less like this proper development, which Newman was trying to defend the church against in the 19th century, to the present day, where people are worried that it's been corrupted in exactly the way that he was worrying as an Anglican that it had been corrupted. Oh, the aggiornamento of Vatican II, isn't that all in fact just a corruption?
They didn't change any doctrine. They didn't change any doctrine with that council, though.
No, they didn't.
No, that was an what do they call it? An ecumenical council. Basically, it was just to get together to talk as a church to the modern world.
How would they call
I
it?
guess they wanted,
disciplinary, or that's not what the word they use. That's not.
No, that wasn't the word. It wasn't doctrinal though, but advisory or something like that. But yeah, it's.
But people, I mean, so Tolkien was one of the ones that was frustrated by the absence of the Latin at Mass. So he keep doing.
He was frustrated by the very brutal and abrupt change to the Mass that people have been using for centuries. I don't blame him. It's worse than others. A lot of places suffering from that, but no, there wasn't any doctrine changed, and I think people get confused when they can see. This is kind of my confusion with the mathematics as a pathway to God. I don't doubt it. I don't understand it, but I don't doubt it because it's not concrete. But when people see concrete things changing, they think doctrine has changed.
So seeing all of these things we're wrestling with, we're worrying about change. We're worrying about causes and origins, and the parent thing being we're worrying about what's true, and the reality of it is we have no idea where any of this comes from at all. Right? I thought in my notes, irony. Okay, so we have two different modes of in origins and change. It's the artificial, someone has an idea and they make something, which is like God's creation is if it's in the beginning God created, well, he had the idea and then created all the world. And if we do that as artists in imitation of our creator, we have an idea about something, write a story or paint a picture or something like that. So we go from an idea to a realization in the material world, or things just somehow the seeds come and then they grow and such. The irony is we have no idea where ideas come from. We talk about them as coming from the gods. They're divine. They're the muses.
Right, muse.
And we have no idea where the seeds came from.
Right.
We have we have no way of knowing where either either of the sources of beginnings come from. So again, how do we know what is true? Either we don't, it's all guesswork, or we have to we have to put our own ideas to the test. And like Newman's trying to, like, how do we test? How do we figure out, is the evolution a good idea? Is a bad idea? How do we test it? This is if your guys are interested, this is actually what Newman is trying to do in his essay is, okay, so ideas are things that we test. If you want to understand, and so it's good to test the ideas of evolution. It's good to test the idea of Christianity. He says, Christianity has been long enough in the world to justify us in dealing with it as a fact in the world's history. And here it is. It's a historical fact. How do we test it? How do we understand it? But in order to understand our ideas, he says, it's a characteristic of our minds to be ever engaged in passing judgments on the things which come before them. So we see stuff, we think about things. No sooner do we learn, but we judge. We allow nothing to stand by itself. We compare, contrast, abstract, generalize, adjust, classify, and we view all our knowledge in the associations with which these processes have invested it. Of the judgments thus exercised, some are mere opinions, which come and go, or remain with us only till an accident displaces them, whatever influence they may exert meanwhile. Others are firmly fixed in our minds and have a hold over us, whether they are principles of conduct or views of life in the world, or fall under the general head of belief. These habitual judgments often go by the name of ideas and shall be called so here, right? So his entire exercise in the book, trying to convince himself of the truth of Catholicism as Christianity, is to test the idea, right? How do we test? But how do we test? Okay, so here we go. Robert Montgomery's great. It's great to have the prof here. I hope so. The spirit of the council has been the issue, or the angel of the Lord comes and shreds you. We test scientific method. So indeed, this is like, I think what I'm wanting to get to is, what ideas do we find most persuasive and why? And the curiosity is, are we even capable of testing them? Vox is trying to test the theory of evolution by natural selection by saying, look, they've never done the math and they've never tested the math. And we are finding out that people who are invested in that particular theory don't care about the math. They don't want to look at it. I mean, my dad as a doctor was very interested in mathematics, and he was constantly saying his colleagues in surgery didn't understand math. So it's not a new argument, right? It's like, it's true that biologists don't tend to think mathematically, and we have seen why. Mathematical thinking maps badly onto, I think mostly they're doing like population statistics. My dad was, in his mathematical modeling, was trying to model bacterial colonies to figure out whether or not infection would be fatal. Mm. I've even seen videos about biofilms now, and I remember Dad talking about that, right? So it's like, and he was frustrated because he couldn't find doctors who understood the mathematical modeling he was putting to the bacterial populations. Okie dokie. Mm-hmm. We have still not figured out why the theory of evolution by natural selection, even when we recognize it as a kind of story, has the absolute certainty that people feel it does as a demonstration of reality. You think we'd have, right? Haven't we?
From what I've seen over the past 30 years, it really is just a religious fervor.
Okay. Everybody ready for the reveal? I'm about to show you why Darwin's argument was ultimately persuasive to people. Are you ready for it? Everybody ready? Ready? There it is. Oh, I know it doesn't show up very well on the screen. Let me make it a bit bigger. Embiggen it a bit more. Oops. So all evolutionary theorists should know this image. And the only thing you have to understand about it is that one, it was published in The Origin of Species, or maybe two. It's the only diagram in The Origin of Species, and it's a tree. And that's I was, sort of thinking about this. Like, for me, Newman's development of doctrine is ultimately persuasive because, let's see, I got all my proofs here. I do it by text. He in fact ultimately, and we talked about this last time, hits on this image of the tree as persuasive for
life?
him. Well, just no, the tree. It is the tree of life, right? But the sort of, how do you know that Christianity is still itself? How do you know that it's gone from seed to full development in the church? And he actually got the image from Tertullian, the third century father. Tertullian's one of the early ones, right? Pre-Nicene. And Tertullian talks about how all things wait their time. Nothing could take place without age. Yes. In short, he says, the preacher says there's a time for all things. So he's quoting Ecclesiasticus. This is still Tertullian. Behold, the creature itself gradually advancing to fruit. At first there is a seed, and a stalk springs out of the seed, and from the stalk bursts out a shrub, and then its branches and foliage grow vigorous, and all that we mean by a tree is unfolded. Then there is the swelling of the bud, and the bud is resolved into a blossom, and the blossom is opened into a fruit, and it for a while rudimental and uninformed, till by degrees tempering its own age, it is matured into mildness of flavor. So too righteousness, for there is the same God, both of righteousness and of the creature, was at first. For in its rudiments a nature-fearing God. Thence, by means of law and prophets, it advanced into infancy. Thence, by the gospel, it burst forth into its youth. And now, by the Paraclete, it is fashioned into maturity. Now, that is, of course, the same image that Tolkien used when in his letter to his son Michael to say, the church has this organic reality, and it grows from the seed. And, even though the tree doesn't look like the seed, it's still the same entity. It's still the
Right.
same. It's the same. So, and here is Darwin's tree. And according to my tree book, he says this. This is where I found out about this tree, because I was looking up trees. And he says, this is the only illustration featured in the first edition of Darwin's On the Origin of Species. The tree is an essential demonstration of his evolutionary thinking and the theory of universal common descent. In the base of the diagram, Darwin lists a series of hypothetical ancestral species spaced irregularly from A to L in order to emphasize their distinction, while above them are various branching schemes indicating subsequent varieties and subspecies. Each division along the vertical axis from 1 to 14 represents 1,000 generations. Even though trees of life tying species together have been created before by figures such as Lamarck, Hitchcock, and Braun, Darwin is the first to introduce a mechanism of change over time, making this the first evolutionary tree of life. And it was, in fact, as it turned out, he says, the diagram, accompanied by his explanations, that truly persuaded a rather reluctant and skeptical audience to accept his groundbreaking ideas.
1,000. That's a very specific number.
It's a diagram of a tree, right? It's a So
it's also mathematical, though.
Well, I'd say
the temptation to disprove it mathematically.
Yes, thus the temptation to disprove it mathematically, but the persuasiveness comes from it being a tree, right? I'd say the persuasiveness of, I found this so funny, right? It's like, watch the metaphors. You have to watch the metaphors that people think by, because those are the things that they're actually using to ground their sense of truth. And the tree, as here's a seed, it grows into this bigger thing. Wouldn't you know? So I'm sorry, my friend my colleague, my university colleague did not answer my invitation to engage directly, but I think here's my theory now, and this is why the math is not going to help. People do not believe in evolution because of the math. The 10,000 generations or whatever, right? They believe in the metaphor of the tree. And here's my proof. From Jerry Coyne's book, the why evolution is true, right? I was looking through his introduction and saying, we have this tree. This is the tree showing reptiles to birds, and then another one he's showing a little bit more, particularly the way in which you get these diagrams. These are simple ones, so they're easy to see on screen, but they're out there everywhere. Let's see. Yeah, here's a great big one, right? It's this beautiful, this is evogeneo.com's Tree of Life. And you say, here's this magnificent, interrelationship of all of the creatures. So and this being for Coin, this is the thing that he finds most beautiful and most persuasive, and is the specific reason that he says creation by design can't happen. Want to hear why?
Yes.
Okay, so he says, actually, the nested arrangements of life, this is from Why Evolution is True. The nested arrangement of life was recognized long before Darwin. Starting with the Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus in 1735, biologists began classifying animals and plants, discovering that they consistently fell into what was called a natural classification. Strikingly, different biologists came up with nearly identical groupings. This for him is definitive, right? And you can feel like it's like reading Newman. Oh well, all the fathers agree, right? If we read, we're following scripture and our doctrine, and all the fathers agree, and it's consistent. There's the proof. Okay. This means that these groupings are not subjective artifacts of a human need to classify, but tell us something real and fundamental about nature. Again, Newman would be happy, right? But nobody knew what the something was until Darwin came along and showed that the nested arrangement of life is precisely what evolution predicts. Okie dokie. Creatures with recent common ancestors share many traits, while those whose common ancestors lay in the distant past are more dissimilar. The natural classification is itself strong evidence for evolution. Going back to here, his nested, he's talking about these nested traits, right? So that you go from vertebrate to jaws to digits to amniotic egg to hair to placenta to opposable thumbs, and that it's that nested structure that he says is the thing that is the strong evidence. Why? I did not expect this, but here you go. Because we don't see such a nested arrangement if we're trying to arrange objects that haven't arisen by an evolutionary process of splitting and descent. Take cardboard books of matches, which I used to collect. They don't fall into a natural classification in the same way as living species. You could, for example, sort matchbooks hierarchically, beginning with size, and then by country, within size, country within country, and so on. Or you could start with the type of product advertised, some sorting thereafter by color and then by date. There are many ways to order them, and everyone will do it differently. There is no sorting system that all collectors agree on. This is because rather than evolving so that each matchbook gives rise to another that is only slightly different, each design was created from scratch by human whim. My artificial versus natural. So this is saying the natural version that's all nested is the one that we know is true by evolution, because if it was artificial and created just by whim, by human whim, nothing would nest. Matchbooks resemble the kinds of creatures expected under a creationist explanation of life.
That's an assumption.
In such a case, I asked him, will you please comment on the math, right? And he said it's religious. And I'm like, well, in such a case, organisms would not have common ancestry, but would simply result from an instantaneous creation of forms designed de novo to fit their environments.
But
under this scenario, we wouldn't expect to see species falling into a nested hierarchy of forms that is recognized by all biologists.
Biologists.
Well, anybody. So it's the see how the metaphor won. The tree looks right, and it's beautiful, and it's
that is completely subjective. And I also heard spontaneous invention in there.
The problem is, it's like, assuming the artificial versus natural. If human beings, like, you realize why the evo arguments matter here, because we evolved, and yet we make fake stuff. We make stuff that's just our ideas coming from nowhere. Like
Hmm.
it's either seeds or ideas, but what if the ideas are seeds? Or what if okay, so the other tree that we tend to look at is this tree of life on the cross. um and then I realized the premises of proof aren't in that I can start from this passage of scripture and prove to you theological demonstration. That doesn't work between Protestants and Catholics, interestingly, because somehow there's something missing there. This argument about the trees, I mean, a creationist could use the tree, this wonderful tree of life diagram, the one with the creatures all nested, to prove creation too. You're never gonna disprove evolution with something that don't acknowledge the mythological element of the proof that's grounded in our experience
Right.
of seeds and ideas,
Yeah, you would have to have a common agreement on something to be able to do that in either direction.
which we call faith.
Yes. Right. Which they won't, but they should, because
Well,
there's still that pesky missing link.
well,
Right.
so but what's interesting is, of course, all of this comes from a culture that used these, the image of God's creation, and recreation on the cross as a tree. So,
Yeah.
Darwin doesn't get that
Oh,
tree out of
right.
nowhere.
Yeah. You guys got it wrong. We've fixed it for you there. So
Well, but okay. So
scientific.
yes, and it's appealing, and so I'd say that this theory of evolution by natural selection continues to be appealing because it answers some of the same needs that the creation story does already.
Hmm.
Orcs are just bad people. Wait, ask about species. Okay, now the guys in the chat, you guys lose me when the arguments are conceptual. Numbers don't exist in nature. Bingo. Okay, good. Not experience, but participation in God's energies. I mean, the problem being you have to accept the axioms to start with, otherwise the proof isn't going to convince you.
Yes.
And so, Jerry's argument that he wasn't going to argue with Fox because it's a religious difficulty is correct, because it's like Protestant.
Yeah.
Jerry's actually Jewish, but they're arguing at a theological level about mechanisms, and like the proof isn't even going to work because you haven't addressed the faith problem in the first place.
So is Coin assuming Vox's mathematics are based on a religious idea?
Well, they're all, yeah. I mean, we know Vox is Christian.
Yeah, we do, and he does that, but
I'm
that
pretty sure
doesn't mean you
Coin is
couldn't.
aware of Vox previous.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't mean you can't present an argument that isn't, explicitly secular.
So no, I don't think there is such a thing. I don't. So they're.
If it were an anonymous author, would you say that though? If you had a book that looked from a completely secular perspective and the author was anonymous, would you accept that as a secular book?
I don't think people don't have theology. I think everybody has a theology. I mean,
I do too.
And this is the.
But we're talking about the presentation, not the motivation behind the writing of the presentation.
Okay, so this is where the problem of proving things, like how do we accept things as true, and then you're going to back up and you're going to realize that most people accept things on authority.
Well, the evolutionists certainly do. Yeah.
Right. That's why Darwin, right? It's like Darwin gave us this way of thinking, and we work from Darwin's thinking. Most people accept ideas on authority. Newman was trying to get to a place where he could accept Catholicism simply as an idea that he had investigated as something that had developed historically. But he does not, in this book, address the problem of revelation at all, because he's simply arguing within Christianity for which form it should be. And I think what's interesting with evolution that the church hasn't taken a position on evolution because the mechanism it's like we don't, could be God's mechanism to create from other creatures. Why not?
Hmm.
Sounds fine, right? It doesn't actually, and I mean, Jerry, I know he's an atheist because he said so. That atheists say, well, we can show you the mechanism, therefore you don't need God, and we're like, that doesn't do anything. That
Doesn't
sorry,
change anything.
changes nothing, right? And
Yeah.
I think the mathematics is not changing their mind because it doesn't actually change the essential thing for them in
Well,
in their in the
it's
appeal of the story that they're working from
a
within.
strange thing to say. I mean, Christians believe God created a physical world. So for you to say, I can show how the mechanism works,
Hmm.
that's nice. Doesn't change anything. We already know God made this. That you can explain it, it's cool.
Right. But the obverse works as well. It's like they're not going to be persuaded by the mathematics, and it's entirely possible they don't understand the mathematics, but I'm not sure that's always the case. I think they don't want to have a demonstration that changes their sense of
No.
the structure of the argument, which is why we look at it. I look at Fox's demonstration and say, yeah, that the structure of their story doesn't work because the time scale is wrong. But it's that kind of argument doesn't change anybody's mind about whether the Earth is 6,000 years old or 4 billion years old. It
Hmm.
the proofs within our ability to prove things, like we don't know exactly how the hunter-gatherers lived anyway. Archaeologically there's a lot of stuff that's suggested about early warfare and towns and things like that, but
Hmm.
um so John is saying once you start on virgin birth, resurrections, etc., people of faith, especially young people, are being gaslit. They're easily destabilized. Well, this is, what about faith people are being gaslit? How are they supported? I'm not sure they're talking to me. I'm not sure that numbers don't exist in nature. Based on our current understanding, there are several numbers that matter. Robert saying Roman Catholic fencer, RC fencer, I guess. Um, but back at the beginning of how do we know our ideas are true? This problem of the demonstrations, we have to have ideas that start axiomatically that we accept as true before we can prove anything, and we are no closer than we were at the beginning of tonight's discussion to figuring out how we do that.
I mean, we haven't
Cheers.
fixed all the world's ills in 2 hours.
Well,
We're slipping.
we haven't explained Revelation. And right, and I don't know how to get outside of that. It's like you either have faith
Well,
or you don't, and
you're either curious or you're not. Also,
well, the thing is we want demonstrations like if I stick my hand in the fire, I get burned. Like we and as as Christians, we could say, well, if you behave in certain ways, bad things happen and you end up in hell. And oh, God hates me. Well, no, it's more you stick your hand in the fire, you'll get burned.
yeah.
So the kind of proof of I am curious, and I've not read Fox's Probability Zero yet, but I haven't seen it in any of the blog posts that I've read. Why he cares so much about making this proof, other than to show that science as a practice is broken. But the sort of that's where I was entertained by the quote, the Bacon quote at the beginning of this book. What are you talking about, sweetie? I'm busy. You're trapped.
He just wanted to express his opinion.
Well, I think maybe I need to ask my husband for help. Just a sec. But my husband may have fallen asleep. Or I may have a cleanup job.
Oh,
Yeah, I know it's really dreary.
poor
Um,
dog.
Francis Bacon thought of knowledge as a tree too. The distributions and partitions of knowledge are not like several lines that meet in one angle and so touch but in a point, but are like branches of a tree that meet in a stem, which hath the dimension and quantity of entireness and continuance before it comes to discontinue and break itself into arms and boughs. I think a lot of probably the appeal of science. I didn't put this picture in the slides, but it's one that came in the book. Actually, maybe I can find it in the book. The more you can, thank you, love. Sending a message internally worked. There's a picture from the encyclopedia, which is the there it is. Hold it up to the camera. Guys, you can look at this one, look up this one. It's trying to show all of the sciences and arts as a single big tree. And that's been of course the great fantasy and desire since the Enlightenment of organizing all knowledge, but that the
Yes.
primary way is organizing all of this knowledge into the tree. So the trees win again. The tree is always the primary image. And it's interesting that as a sacred image, it is so persuasive to people, because if we ground all of our convictions of reality, how do we know something's true? Maybe it's just like we put it in a tree. There you go. It's a tree. Proving or not having the right elements in that science tree threatens our sense of all knowledge. So maybe that's that's what's at stake.
They want certainty, and they don't want their certainty challenged. But I don't know why they want certainty in things that are created. Like they want certainty in the universe and certainty in I guess their physical existence.
Oh yes, you
Why?
do. Oh yes, you do. You can name it. You can name what they want. What do they want? What do they want?
They want to be like God.
Yep. They want control.
Yeah, they want to control it.
They want control.
But I don't understand why they want that. Why do they want control?
Well, indeed. Why do they want control? What is it about us that, as human beings, the one thing that we know about humanity is that we're fallen because we wanted control.
Yeah. That's true. It's kind of built into our DNA.
Oh, as you might say. The guys are coming back in. Success? False alarm. Maybe the dog, the dog just desperately wanted my attention. What did the dog want to tell me? What does the dog say? I feel like in a Wes Anderson movie, there's the Isle of Dogs.
He has the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
He's trying to tell me. He knows.
Only.
Listen to the dogs. Listen to the creatures. Well, that's yes. Maybe there, right? I think I mean it always comes back around to the need for the cross and the need for our redemption, which is interesting. It's so I'm still struggling with the why. It's like evolution is a positive. It's like a hopeful story to say we're just going to keep changing and we're not going to be fallen. And so disproving that theory is also potentially theologically saying, and we need Christ. Again, I don't. That's not exactly the way Vox has styled his challenge, but it is the way Jerry responded to it, saying, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there because this challenges my vision of promise." I think it's the dog, Ma. Yeah. Okay, who alone determines cat dogma? There's dog dogma. Cat. Okay. All right. So we have gotten around. I hope to. That came to a better like circular conclusion than I would go back to Bulbasaur. Who because there you go. The Bulbasaurs will conclude. Other than listening to the dog, how do we know what is true?
Oh, what is truth? Is mine the same as yours?
You're quoting the Jesus Christ Superstar. So that I will say at the meta level, we are thinking about this because Casey and I are embarking now on the composition of Act 5. We know we keep promising you guys that there's more of Draco Chemicus to come. We also recognize that until we finish Draco Chemicus, it will be a perpetual mystery because we're trying to solve this problem right now. How do we address humanity's challenge to its creator, and wish us luck, right? We're gonna need some
Yeah.
help this year, and
We're going to need prayers, not luck.
we're gonna need a lot of prayers. We're gonna need a lot of prayers to get to this point where we really can unpack why we have the questions that we do, why we're maybe he just woke up, right? He's been having a nice nap and we've been going for long enough and now time is up. Why we have the questions we do, what count as actual persuasive arguments, and to invite you guys along in our practice this year, because this is we tend to write an act a year. We did Act 4 last year. It's got all this alchemy in it. We promise it's really cool.
That was the hardest one.
Alchemy
so far,
was so hard to write. This one's more like the Great Hall and the challenge of the professors to Christ. But we need to practice unpacking the kinds of persuasions that people who have decided that they can do without Christ have brought themselves to. And to do that, we're doing this kind of exercise in studying theology. I'm really sorry about the dog. Can't do anything about him.
It's okay.
And that's what creatures are like. You can't control them. I have no magic wand for my Harry Potter desire to look like silencio. So we'll just have to carry on and make promises. Okay, so we've now, I think, set our agenda for the upcoming year, which is wrestling with all of these arguments of reality and truth.
Yeah.
And we are grateful for you guys who were hanging out with us tonight to help us wrestle with this question.
It is a lot of wrestling, and as we wrestle with it, I come to understand rather quickly why people don't like asking the questions.
Yeah, that's so. Robert's asking, did Vox do his own research on this piece? He's been testing it. He's been in conversation with people, but I think he's mainly been testing it through various AIs, which he has been trying to get them to stress test his mathematics on. How do you know what's true? When you see the Lord and he touches your hip. These are good answers. Dog is jonesing. Yeah. Okay. Bye, Rob. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. Please tell your friends that we're trying to wrestle with the big ideas here, and it will be helpful to have more people to show up in the conversations. Otherwise, it's me and Casey trying to bounce the stuff off each other.
Yeah, no kidding. It really would help a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because we want to. I mean, this is. I'm always wary of setting this a project because this isn't a class, right? And we can't always expect everyone to have been here for every episode. But we are trying to build some kind of real understanding here, because the project that we're working on in Draco Chemicus is to help us think through why it's so hard for people to feel ourselves inside this myth as a living thing in modernity. Which is why we're having, it's like, a philosophical allegory of the love of God for his creation. But to understand that, we have to understand where we are in modernity and why it's been so hard for us to see this reality. No, like minor ambition on our part. But I mean, why ask any other question, right? It's like we want to know God. So, but we're trying to get there by way of the sorts of challenges that we have given ourselves as humanity to be able to see God in our present condition.
Right. Our present condition. That's well said.
Okay.
We're just trying to figure ourselves out in our position in the universe.
Yes. and to do it in a way that helps address the current questions that people have, so that, like, why sin is so appealing, how we got trapped in the rhetoric and persuasion and stories, why we can't hear God in the way that the medieval Christians could, as we see in their art and their
Right.
storytelling, and how we can get back to that sense of being in the great love story.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, so if that sounds like something that is appealing, we welcome you to the Ark, and we'll be here next week with another piece of the exercise. Bye, everyone.
Okay.